For the first few Five Nights at Freddy's games, just like clockwork, each entry would introduce a new variation of the main band. First it was the originals, later known as the classics. Then the Toys and the Wizards, then the Phantoms. This trend even followed in later games with the Rockstars and the Glamrocks, and so on. But for a while during the beginning, it was only necessary that every game introduced a new variation of the same Freddy, Chica, Bonnie, and Foxy, and because of this, it was almost predictable. And then there was this one band known as the Nightmares, one that at the time originated as this new and extra spooky version of the Freddy band. One that stood out, but might have also seemed like a formulaic entry at the same time, but later turned out to be something much more. You see, the Nightmares stand out as being part of an insidious subplot in Five Nights at Freddy's that is built up in numerous games, looming in the background but never in clear focus. One that had to be discovered through clues and breadcrumbs before eventually being more transparently revealed years later in the books. But it was always there, and it truly is a nightmarish reality for these midnight arriving mutants. But we can delve into that after we address the Nightmares themselves, who they are, what they are, and then where they came from and what they are made for. The Nightmare Animatronics are the primary antagonists of Fnaf 4. They are fit with large mouths filled with sharp teeth, clawed hands, red eyes, and bulky misshapen builds filled with holes that expose their metal insides. Their suits look like they could be dirty, frayed, and many of them have extra appendages or parts that look exceptionally deadly. They are called the Nightmares primarily because of these hideous features. Well, and because of the circumstances surrounding them. Fnaf 4 is broken into two sections, the actual nighttime gameplay and the story being told through the minigames in between each night, and the beginning of night bonus minigame, but that's more of a feature that we'll get into later. The daytime minigames show the tragic life of a crying child who is bullied by his older brother and his friends, who all wear Freddy masks. He also frequently visits a Freddy establishment that seems to be Fredbear's family diner. He is terrified of the animatronics, and for good reason. Children on the playground spread all sorts of rumors about terrible things that go on at Freddy's, and the crying child has no choice but to get dragged there daily. In one disturbing minigame, he is even locked into a back room by his brother, trapped with the deconstructed bodies and the headless Fredbear suit that looks disturbingly like there's human hair sticking out of its neck. It is clear why the crying child would be so fearful of this place. He is largely left alone with little support from anyone except a peculiar talking Fredbear plush, one that often spends its time being matter-of-fact and reminding him it is always there, but being unable or unwilling to truly help him. But all of this reflects on the primary gameplay, the nights. Every night you find yourself confined to a bedroom with two doors, a closet, a bed, and some toys, and a gang of these monstrous animatronics trying to get in and reach you. You have to dart between the doors and close them and the closet and shine the flashlight around to keep them at bay. Now, it is never directly stated that this is the crying child we play as in the night sections. Fnaf 4 seems to make a good enough case that it is, but recent games have given the franchise an unreliable narrator that can't be shaken, and as such, who this person is on the nights is not guaranteed. Could be the crying child, could be his brother, could be someone we don't know about. I will be treating it as though it is the crying child for simplicity's sake. And though we are mainly focusing on Fnaf 4 right now, I will also include Ultimate Custom Night and Help Wanted appearances so I don't have to go back to them later, and to give a better overview of these characters. I also want to mention up front that you won't hear me speaking a lot of the Nightmares' personalities, and that's because, save one exception, all of the ones with voices virtually share identical personalities. Angry, sadistic, vengeance-seeking beasts. And that's not a fault. I'm just saying there's not much differentiating the lot personality-wise. But let's get into them. First off is Nightmare Freddy.
I am given flesh to be your tormentor. No light can save you now.
Nightmare Freddy is a garish version of Freddy Fazbear with large sharp teeth, sharp, almost drill-like claws, and a hole-filled suit. Pretty much the standard in Nightmare design. But the catch with him is that he doesn't come alone. Crawling out of his body are the Freddles, his little bear spawn that resemble him greatly, but are a 12th his size. Whether these are separate entities or little pieces of himself is unknown, but they seemingly can either spawn him or form into him. See, Nightmare Freddy comes in through the bed, and how he does this is that the Freddles will appear on the bed, 1, 2, 3, and you must use the flashlight to scare them off. If you don't, Nightmare Freddy will form in their place, spring out of the bed, and jump scare you. Nightmare Freddy's mechanics in Ultimate Custom Night are very similar. The Freddles will appear on the desk, and you will have to shine them away with your flashlight to keep Nightmare Freddy away. It is in Help Wanted when these mechanics change. As Nightmare Freddy appears in a level, you travel down a hallway towards the Fnaf 4 bedroom. Nightmare Freddy is creeping up behind you, Slaughter Me Street style. I'm sure anyone who recognizes that name hasn't heard it for a while. And you must keep moving so that he doesn't catch you. But instead of the Freddles being a direct threat, they're just hanging out on Freddy. It is the other nightmares who try to thwart your escape. The Freddles do have a bigger role without Nightmare Freddy in the Build-A-Mangle level though, where you have to, as expected, build a mangle. The Freddles may come down the conveyor belts, and you have to tase them to keep them from jump scaring you. The second nightmare is Nightmare Bonnie, a sharp-toothed, long-clawed bunny rabbit. His worn suit leans more towards a toy Bonnie blue than a classic Bonnie indigo, and he wears a bright red bow tie that's in surprisingly good condition, though his entire belly beneath it is gutted. Unlike Freddy, he has never been given a voice. Nightmare Bonnie works as a sort of tag team with Nightmare Chica, coming down the left hall while she comes down the right. He will creep up to the door and you will have to listen for his breathing and close the door to drive him away. This is a more simplified version of FNAF 4's mechanics, of course. Though in Ultimate Custom Night, Nightmare Bonnie, strangely enough, has a completely different mechanic. He is in the same vein as Circus Baby and Nightmare Mangle, where he will appear in the right hallway and you have to buy a Bonnie plush from the prize corner to subdue him. Otherwise, after a while, he will jump scare you. In Help Wanted, he is also in the hallway level, appearing in the left side doors. He will try to reach out for you, and you must wait until it's clear to move forward, while Nightmare Freddy is still creeping up behind. It fits with his FNAF 4 appearance, left door and all. Nightmare Bonnie is the nightmare with the least to say about him, so that largely covers him. Moving on to Nightmare Chica. Design-wise, she has all of the usual features in a nightmare: sharp teeth, sharp claws, and a worn exterior. Uniquely to her, a tattered bib hangs on her chest, and she has 2 different colored eyes. Or at least, it looks like her right eye, left to us, has perhaps gone out. Her head shape also resembles withered Chica's more than classic Chica. Like Nightmare Freddy, Chica doesn't come alone. She is accompanied by her Cupcake, who too is in a nightmare form, with glowing eyes and sharp teeth. And yes, he too is capable of jump scaring you. Nightmare Chica functions very similarly to Bonnie, except she comes down the right hall and has a funny addition in the form of the Cupcake. If you're by the door when jump scared, it'll be Chica. But if you're inside, it'll actually be her Nightmare Cupcake that does the deed. In Ultimate Custom Night, Nightmare Chica has a starkly different means of attack, and is the only nightmare who isn't part of the main roster, and is instead a secret animatronic spawned by Dee Dee. When she appears, teeth will line the screen and she will try to bite down on you. You must use the AC to push her back. Nightmare Chica also appears in the hallway level of Help Wanted, with her on the right side of the hall and the doorways, again the other half of Bonnie. But that hallway level was introduced in the DLC Curse of Dreadbear. But oddly enough, her Nightmare Cupcake actually replaces normal Cupcake in some of the harder levels of the main game, even without Nightmare Chica present. Nightmare Bonnie and Chica are pretty much a package deal. They're the reason the crying child can't just run out of the right door and start looping around the house to get a jump on Nightmare Bonnie. Chica renders all of those Bugs Bunny tactics off the table. Nightmare Foxy is a different beast entirely. Lacking in voice but with an especially large jaw filled with dozens of teeth, a large curved hook, and somehow looking even more all-around pointier than the others, this rusty red fox looks just as vicious as he is. And since Bonnie and Chica sort of behave in a way that's a variation of how they appear in FNAF 1, coming down the hallways, you would think Foxy might too, And he does, but not in the way you might think. Foxy will try to run down the hallway and get into the room, but it's not to jump scare you, and you likely won't see him doing this. It's to camp out in your bedroom closet, where you will then have to continuously check between him and a Foxy plush and close the doors on him if it is him. Nightmare Foxy doesn't return in Ultimate Custom Night, but he does appear in Help Wanted's hallway level, where he will appear in the hallway and you have to stop in place until he leaves. Sort of like a red light green light game, while trying to outrun a creeping semi-truck rolling up behind you. That's Nightmare Foxy's appearances, but that's not where his story ends. See, Nightmare Foxy specifically is very important to the story of FNAF 4, as he is what gives us the biggest clue to what the nightmares are. While in the closet, Nightmare Foxy will do a little jump and stick his head forward when you check him. And when he does this, he makes a noise. This noise is the same noise that the crying child's older brother makes when he jumps out from somewhere to scare him. In fact, hiding in a closet and popping out with a rah is exactly what the older brother would do if there was actually a closet in the crying child's bedroom. It is there where we put the connections together that these four nightmares, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, are not just nightmarish versions of the original animatronics, but reflections of the crying child's tormentors, his brother, and the Bullies. The brother was the reason that the crying child never felt safe. He brought the fears of Freddy's home, masking himself as one of the creatures the crying child feared. He would stalk him around the house, hide, and jump out, leaving him sobbing on the floor. There was no escape from his fears when he was his brother's favorite target. And the behavior only escalated, from jumping and scaring him to locking him in a back room. The brother held no punches. But at the very least, he didn't physically harm his brother, until something went terribly wrong. On the day of the crying child's own birthday party, a party held at the one place he feared, with his bullies in attendance, his brother and friends decided they were going to play a cruel prank and dragged him to the stage, kicking and screaming, and shoved his head into Fredbear's mouth. They laughed as they watched him struggle in the bear's mouth, before suddenly the suit went off and crushed the crying child's head in its jaws. They stared on as the crying child's body went limp. It is unclear when the bite takes place in proportion to the nights, if they are one for one, first day, first night, second day, second night, etc., or not. But considering the Easter egg hallucinations of hospital equipment, flowers, and pills that can be seen in the bedroom, it is very possible that these nights and nightmares took place perhaps after the bite. The full scenario is unclear, but what is clear is that the reason the nightmares have such emphasized teeth is because of the bite. They're not just a reflection of the bullies, but the bite incident itself, as presented in its living embodiment, Nightmare Fredbear. Nightmare Fredbear is the largest and most formidable of the Nightmare Animatronics, an enormous bear with a mouth circled in sharp, stained red teeth, and with a second mouth of teeth hidden inside of his maw, and a third stretched across his belly. He has long claws, a purple top hat and bow tie, and 2 black buttons on his chest, and bloodshot red eyes. Its shoddy golden-colored suit gives away that it is a doppelganger of Fredbear himself, if the name didn't give it away. Nightmare Fredbear appears on night 5, and once he does, he is the only threat. He replaces all the other nightmares to an impossible degree, capable of coming down both hallways, through the closet, and phasing even through the bed at the same time. He is overwhelming, coming from every angle, a gruesome, unstoppable force, in a way not too unfamiliar to the bite itself, especially if he's the embodiment of a bite that already happened. One of the most eerie things in it, in my opinion, being Nightmare Fredbear's head jutting out of the bed, almost resembling the crying child's plush head randomly jutting out of scenery sprinkled around his house, always watching. It's a tough battle, a one-on-one with one carrying the strength of 4, and even when you win, you don't truly win. As a quick aside, Nightmare Fredbear appears in Ultimate Custom Night and Help Wanted like the other nightmares. In Ultimate Custom Night, he will come to the left door, and you can hear his laughter and see his eyes to show he is there. You will then need to shut the door on him.
Let me put you back together, then take you apart all over again.
In Help Wanted, Nightmare Fredbear has his own level. It is pretty much an abbreviated version of FNAF 4's Fifth Night, with him coming down the hallways and trying to get through the door, and you having to close it in time to stop him. And also appearing like on the bed and in the closet. The major difference being that this level allows you to watch him plod all the way into the room and grab you. Back to Nightmare Fredbear himself being the last threat, and with the telltale clues of blood and multiple mouths, like I said earlier, he is a direct embodiment of the bite itself, the traumatic incident materializing into the image of a frightening bear built to bite. The crying child's mental image of Fredbear. So, this is the truth, isn't it? These nightmares are all part of this event, as seen through the mind of the crying child. Possibly the twisted memories of a child succumbing to a wound that was inflicted on him by his own brother. Confined to a hospital bed, comatose, he is trapped in memories and nightmares. His damaged brain concocts these distorted experiences as a way of explaining and coping with his approaching death. Suddenly, everything makes sense, and it is terribly tragic. A sad end to the miserable life of a child trapped between people who didn't care, people who would abuse him, and a restaurant that was supposed to bring joy to children, but only brought pain. His personal prison. It is all just a never-ending nightmare. Except for one thing. And that one thing is an enormous pitch-black bear known as Nightmare.
You will not be spared. You will not be saved.
Nightmare is a darkened-out version of Nightmare Fredbear. His entire body is black with a yellow top hat and bow tie, and the same red eyes as the others. He is identical to Fredbear, save for his color scheme, so you would assume that he is simply just a harder recolor for gaming purposes. But there is something wrong with Nightmare. Nightmare appears in Nightmare Mode and 2020 Mode. He is the most difficult animatronic of the bunch we've covered, being the same as Fredbear but more difficult. Simplifying it again. His jump scare is also different, just being a darkened screen where his eyes and teeth are the only things mostly visible. He also appears in Ultimate Custom Night where he is on the right side door. You can see his eyes and hear his laugh and must shut the door to drive him away. So it seems simple enough. Nightmare is just another Fredbear variant, just another distorted, shadowy version of the bite. Except there is one more thing I haven't mentioned about Nightmare. When the screen is brightened, when you look carefully, Nightmare isn't solid. Hidden inside is a skeletal form. What is that? Is it a human skeleton? A broken mechanical version of the hideous monster that bit the child? Or a self-reflection of his own broken body? No, that endo is solid. It is Nightmare's endoskeleton, though instead of wearing a suit, it is wearing a gaseous illusion. Because that's what it is. An illusion. The nightmares are real. In Sister Location, a game involving a different plot entirely, there is a secret connecting to FNAF 4 hidden in plain sight. In the game, you venture into a factory intertwined with the child murderer William Afton and must face his monsters, his chrome-plated killer circus baby band, to try to survive in one piece. And on night 2, you see something you are likely not supposed to see. While resetting the breakers on night 2, you see a map of the surrounding complex. There's the galleries and the auditorium that you see in the game, the control module, the breaker room, etc. And 2 rooms labeled as observation rooms. You might recognize their layouts already. There's a third one as well on the bottom left that isn't labeled but is another one of these observation rooms. In a little while I'm going to talk about Plush Trap and his minigame, so I'll get back to that. In the top left is Observation 1, which consists of a cluster of rooms attached to another one by a passage. This is the FNAF 4 minigame map. The crying child's house is the cluster of rooms, the path is where he walks from the diner to his house, and the singular room is the diner. This whole area where the crying child lived is not only directly connected to the factory, but is under its surveillance. Maybe that explains the Fredbear plush being everywhere and watching everything. Observation 2 is in the top right and is directly connected to the private room. The layout is the exact same as the bedroom in the night encounters, and it is the bedroom. Because in the private room, upon entering the 1983 code, the monitors come on and show the bedroom under a live feed. This is why the crying child's bedroom doesn't match the bedroom where you fight off the nightmares. This is not the crying child's bedroom, nor is it a place located in his memories. It is a real physical location hidden deep in the depths of this factory. And if we needed any more evidence, guess who is waiting in the office? The crying child's own Fredbear plush, alongside of a radio. And now we must really begin questioning who he is, because it's clear from the cameras, from the monitoring, from the secret rooms in the basement, that this psychic friend is hiding some dark secrets. Some folks believe he is the toy that the puppet is speaking through. Some think a part of Golden Freddy is speaking through it. I think the barren radio sitting lifeless in Afton's private office speaks for itself. But what about the nightmares? Well, here's the important part. Dotted across the maps are these little squares. These squares signal where the animatronics are, as we can tell by one for Funtime Freddy even being located in the breaker room, which is where he is when we see the map. The two squares up in the Observation 1 are Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. And what do you know, up in Observation 2 there are 4 squares. These are the 4 Nightmare Animatronics. And perhaps the 5th, Nightmare Fredbear, replacing them. They are not dreams. Those were real monsters, and they were likely built by William Afton. And suddenly the tragic situation surrounding the crying child takes a surprisingly darker tone, because now we know someone was puppeteering the entire situation. Someone was watching him during the day and likely bringing him to these private rooms at night, unless they were meant for someone else. Not that it matters much, it was all some sort of sick experiment by a disturbed man, and yes, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that Afton was behind this. The man was making animatronics to murder children, we know that much. He just also had a second set to specifically torment others. But there's still a lot of questions about what happened here, about the nightmares, and to get to those answers we have to look elsewhere. The next clue comes from an unexpected place. The second book in the Silver Eyes trilogy, The Twisted Ones. In the book, the titular Twisted Ones are a gaggle of hideous animatronics hunting the main character, Charlie Emily. These animatronics resemble the nightmares greatly, with their huge mouths filled with rows of teeth, long sharp claws, and glowing eyes, though only some of them have red eyes. They also have added features such as extra jaws, enormous bellies, giant hooks with gross holes in them. They're pretty nasty, but the similarities between them and the nightmares are clear. And we know for a fact that they are directly under the call of William Afton, which makes it even more interesting to note that this isn't what they really look like. These are illusions. Underneath that, the Twisted Ones look like normal animatronics with pale basic bodies. In the graphic novel, and only there, the Freddy even looks like Funtime Freddy, though that was likely a simplification for drawing purposes. More importantly, these are just normal animatronics that use technology to make themselves look like monsters. And now we look at Nightmare, the Endoskeleton wearing a cloak of darkness. And now we listen to Nightmare Fredbear.
I assure you, I am very real. This time, there is more than an illusion to fear.
Considering the word illusion and the name of the technology in the book is called the illusion discs, I don't think that's a coincidence. Illusion discs are complicated. How they're used is inconsistent. They supposedly allow you to see an illusion you think you're supposed to see, but also sometimes just show everyone the same thing anyways. And I think that's just a plot hole that crops up from working with a plot element like this. But under the concept that you see what your mind thinks you should see, the crying child envisioning the illusions of the nightmares to be big monsters with giant teeth fits the bill exactly. Now that being said, there is no indication that illusion discs exist in the Fnaf game continuity, or that the nightmares exist in the book, as the Twisted Animatronics may just be the book versions of the nightmares. Though it should be noted that Nightmare is on the cover, though he isn't in the book. But there is something else that causes hallucinations, and it was revealed a game before FNAF 4. Stepping back to Fnaf 3, we have another variation of animatronics similar to the Nightmares, and these are the Phantoms. Taking place in the Fazbear Fright horror attraction, the character you play as must ward off the rotten-out rabbit known as Springtrap while managing the camera system and the ventilation. The ventilation is very important here because there is something in the air, and it's not just asbestos fibers and mold spores. The Phantoms can jump scare you and distort your systems, but they can't kill you, because they're not real. They are not ghosts, and you know how we know? Because of the Phantom puppet, haunting you, watching your eyes, its face charred and burned. Except the puppet is in Fnaf 3. Largely missable, an Easter egg really, the real puppet can physically be spotted in Fazbear Fright. That is the puppet. The Phantom puppet is merely a hallucination. Now this is where we get into fear gas. Not mentioned in name in, well, any game that I'm aware of, and not specifically mentioned in Fnaf 3 at all, but mentioned in the books and seemingly matches what's going on here, this fear gas causes hallucinations, and seems to, for the most part, replace illusion discs in the game series. Now, at the time, there weren't enough details to truly label the gas that creeps into the offices as anything except bad ventilation, but recently things have changed that, and I'll get back to that. Now, are these hallucinations being controlled by the puppet? Maybe. But that's not important. What's important is that these hallucinations are very targeted, and it makes you wonder what someone would see if they were poisoned with this while, oh, I don't know, in a dark bedroom with a bunch of animatronics. They would probably see something distorted, just like the Phantoms. So we have Fnaf 3 setting up these rampant hallucinations. We have the Nightmare Animatronics in this situation in Fnaf 4. We have the Illusion Disc plotline revealed in the Twisted Ones. And then we have this entire labyrinth of observation rooms, surveillance, and the confirmation that the Nightmare Animatronics are real in Sister Location. All of this on its own paints a pretty good picture of what's going on, but the final pin in the cushion was surprisingly with one of the newer short stories in Tales from the Pizzaplex. So the Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex books have been known to reintroduce plotlines from the games with new characters and scenarios, such as a handful of stories where animatronics, goo, and sea bonnies overtake bodies, a la Michael Afton Scooping. One specifically where a girl gets gutted and Endoskeleton stuffed. There's a story of Jake, a boy who speaks to his father through his doll, which could parallel psychic friend Fredbear, and the list goes on. So I want to preface this by saying that I'm not saying the story is 100% canon, but I am saying that the storyline is very deliberate. This isn't a guy having nanobots tattoo him to death. This is very purposeful. And this purposeful story is called Dittophobia. For note, Dittophobia means the fear of repetition. I'm going to keep this short, but it's about a boy named Rory who is being tormented by nightmarish animatronics in his house, and finds himself all alone, his parents always absent. The twist being that he discovers that this isn't his house, but a testing facility underneath the factory from Sister Location, and he has been being sedated, manipulated, and brainwashed by this hallucinogenic gas for years. That he's in this fully automated testing cell and has been living life as a scared little boy while his life slips away. With it being heavily hinted at the end that he is totally alone. Not even Afton is there anymore. This aligns with what we see in Sister Location, Fnaf 4, all of it very well. Does this mean Rory is the crying child? No, he is described to be totally different. But this could be giving us a look at what these rooms could have been used for. For surely Afton wouldn't use it only for one or two victims. So it's confirmed, right? It's canon. The nightmares were real and these rooms were used to torment and torture kidnapped children. It definitely seems that way. But, see, in the world of Five Nights at Freddy's, we don't know when something is a confirmation or a reflection of a theory. After all, dream theory, something I have purposefully not tackled in this video because it's a divisive topic, though have kind of mentioned in passing, has been referenced numerous times throughout the series, but is as of now obviously not canon. And in recent games, we've had the idea planted that the first 6 games either happened differently or might have not happened at all. So we can't say concretely for sure, but it certainly looks like this is what they're trying to say. So, that's the secret of the nightmares, is it? It's a major 180 from the initial suggestion that they were all just a dying boy's warped memories of his accident. And in a way, it goes to show how majorly the plot of FNAF can shift between games. Remember, FNAF 4 was the final chapter at first. Scott posted hints to solve the lore such as 4 games, 1 story, and what is seen in the shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child. Which backed up the initial idea that this was what was happening, only to have Sister Location suddenly rewrite the narrative. Because like I said, fear gas wasn't a concept in FNAF 3. It was a narrative added in retrospect. There wasn't gas at the time, just bad ventilation and hallucinations, which were already in FNAF before this game. Yet the addition of further narrative later on adds more context that wasn't there initially. It's an interesting thing to think about. But surprisingly, we are not done here. We have a huge chunk of minigame and Halloween exclusive Nightmare animatronics that we have to talk about. And why I didn't mention them earlier is because to jump from Nightmare to Jack-O-Bonnie and then back to Nightmare would have been a little disjointed. So let's take a step back and return to FNAF 4, and specifically to the Halloween update. But first, one of the things I didn't mention earlier was the Fun with Plush Trap minigame, and Plush Trap himself, who is apparently classified as a Nightmare animatronic. This small version of Springtrap will creep down the hall and through the doors lining it, and you have to catch him with the flashlight over the X on the floor and get a bonus doing so. I have an entire video devoted to Plush Trap, so I'm not going to spend any more time on him. However, this Fun with Plush Trap minigame is the source of the 3rd observation room, a hallway with little doors. Though interestingly enough, there seems to be 5 animatronics flagging there instead of 1. I'm not sure if the implication is that there's 5 plush traps, or if some of them are other animatronics, like the mini-arenas, like shown in Help Wanted's plush trap level. It's a mystery. Moving on, we have Nightmare Balloon Boy.
Come closer. Help me count my teeth.
A more traditional Nightmare animatronic with sharp teeth, claw-like fingers, and bright red eyes. He has a rounded, stout body with a striped shirt and hat and blue pants, little brown feet, and large hands with long, crooked fingers. He has a rounded head split into 2, with circular rows of lamprey-like sharp teeth hidden inside. 2 rows on the bottom, seemingly only 1 row at the top, and his head can flip all the way back to open all the way. He has red cheeks, a little inset red nose, and bright red eyes that constantly glow. He's featured in his own variation of Fun with Plush Trap, Fun with Balloon Boy, an additional minigame added in the Halloween update. The hideous rounded gremlin sits perched on Plush Trap's chair before creeping down the hall just like Plush Trap does, darting between doors, and you have to hit him with the beam of light to get him to stop on the X. This is his only role in FNAF 4, but he does return in Ultimate Custom Night and Help Wanted. His Help Wanted role is an updated version of the Fun with Balloon Boy minigame, simple enough, but he does have a different mechanic in Ultimate Custom Night. He's moved his chair from the end of the hall to the office and will sit there slumped over. If he perks up, you have to shine the flashlight on him, while making sure to not flash him if he's dormant, or it'll trigger a jump scare.
You're not so big. Just a bite-sized morsel.
So, remember when I said earlier that the Nightmares don't really have different personalities, save one? Nightmare Balloon Boy is pretty much the only one who has a somewhat different personality. Don't get me wrong, it's still all threatening and mocking, but BB stands out as being a little more mischievous. Instead of, "I was the one created by the one you wronged and have now been born of the shadows to invoke the revenge of the fallen sun," he is pretty much... In short, Nightmare Balloon Boy is grotesque. He's a funky Pez dispenser if dreamed up through breathing too many gas fumes. He both fits the nightmares perfectly and stands out as a freak of the show. Not a big role, thank goodness, but he does leave an impression. Next up are Jack-O-Chica and Jack-O-Bonnie, the Halloween-themed replacements to Nightmare Chica and Nightmare Bonnie.
Greetings from the field.
The 2 are yellow-orange in color and are lit up through their eyes and holes in their suit like jack-o'-lanterns. Though when in the halls in FNAF 4, they lack this lighting, and during FNAF AR gameplay, their eyes seem to glow brighter than the rest of their body. Also, Jack-O-Chica has a Jack-O-Lantern to replace her Cupcake. Being replacement for the Nightmares, both Jack-O-Chica and Bonnie play very similarly to their original versions, even down to the Jack-O-Lantern replacing the Nightmare Cupcake in that specific jump scare. The two have had quite a few appearances together, and help wanted the two stand in for Bonnie and Chica in a Nightmare Curse of Dreadbear version of The Office, with Grim Foxy and Dreadbear himself replacing Foxy and Freddy respectively. Both appear in Fnaf AR Special Delivery as animatronics who you can encounter and collect. The two didn't have any real unique gameplay styles, but they did have a gimmick where they would make the screen smoky and you would have to shake it away. Oddly enough, Jack-O-Chica gets a little bit more favoritism compared to Bonnie, both by being the only one of the two with voice lines.
I am a burning reminder of your misdeeds.
And being the only one to appear in Ultimate Custom Night. In Ultimate Custom Night, Jack-O-Chica has a temperature-based mechanic that honestly makes a lot of sense. If it gets warm, it will trigger her to appear outside both of the doors, and you will have to shut them to drive her away. Though if it is warm enough, over 100 degrees, shutting the doors will not work and she will jump scare you anyway. But that is really all that can be said about the Jack-O animatronics. They've been pretty popular and appear relatively frequently in the franchise. I might mention them again in the near future, but for now I'll leave them here. The next Nightmare is another replacement, but one who is a new interpretation of an old favorite, Nightmare Mangle. Nightmare Mangle is a Nightmare version of Mangle who stands in for and plays like Nightmare Foxy. The only difference being that they make a noticeable static noise from the closet that can make it harder to hear. Nightmare Mangle looks a lot like the original Mangle, but with the stereotypical Nightmare features, a mouthful of sharp teeth, sharp claws, and a worn exterior. Even Mangle's second head has little jagged teeth. It's a neat appearance, but to tell you the truth, I frequently forget this thing even exists, even though it technically appeared in 2 games. By the way, it would be a 2 on the smooching scale. Horrendous teeth, not cute or sympathetic, but technically has lips. And so it's come to this. Nightmare Mangle's second return is an Ultimate Custom Night. They, like Nightmare Bonnie, will appear and hang out in the hallway until you buy them a Funtime Foxy plushie out of the prize corner. Then they assumedly take the plushie and mosey on away. And that's the impact of Nightmare Mangle. As you can see, these Halloween-exclusive animatronics don't necessarily have huge roles. Characters like Jack-O-Bonnie and Jack-O-Chica did become reoccurring characters, but for the most part, their actual impact was minimal. Though there was one who left a bit of a bigger mark on the franchise, and that was the replacement for Nightmare Fredbear and Nightmare, known as the Nightmarian, a Nightmare version of the puppet.
I am the fearful reflection of what you have created.
The Nightmarian is tall and thin, skeletal, down to even having rib-like protrusions around its chest. It has long pointed legs that are made of twisted fibers. Its arms match and end in 3 long black and white striped fingers, like tentacles. Its white mask resembles the puppet's, but with a rounder face, black lips and stripes, and wider black eyes with white dots in the center. Of all the Halloween animatronics added to Fnaf 4, I believe Nightmarian is the best designed. Not just because I like the puppet's design, but because there's just so many interesting details that stand out about it. It's not just teeth and claws. It's teeth and licorice fingers. It's an emaciated mime who is way too happy to see you. The Nightmarian and its wiggly Tickle-Fingers are a threat beyond any else encountered in FNAF 4, and that is mostly based off of how uncomfy and off-putting this thing can be, especially once someone made the questionable decision to give its licorice hands gooey tentacle sound effects. It works the same as Nightmare Fredbear and Nightmare, but while it's running around, there is also a music box playing, which can make it even more difficult to suss out faint sounds. It's nothing spectacular, but technically it is the final boss, if only of the Halloween mode. Also, a cute little thing about Nightmarian in FNAF 4 is that the teaser of it was actually labeled as "Don't Wake the Baby," which is a reference to Markiplier, who said the same thing. A neat little nod. But moving past FNAF 4, Nightmarian returned in Ultimate Custom Night. Basically, he appears on screen and you have to keep your cursor off of him so he doesn't jump scare you. He then returned in Help Wanted in a bedroom level where he will either come in through the hallways or, in a shocking change of pace, reach in and waggle his tickle fingers through the closet or from under the bed or from a hole in the ceiling, and you will have to shine the light on them to force them to retreat and shut the bedroom door to keep them from just walking in. I do find the angle of having the licorice whip fingers be so wiggly to be a pretty nice detail. It's not exactly scary, but it's a lot more intimidating and interesting to look at than just having him jut out of the bed like a scarecrow. It really makes him stand out. But that's far from being the only reason that Nightmarian is a special case. So when talking about a lot of these nightmares, I mostly speak in past tense because while they make occasional appearances, their prevalence in the games and their story have ultimately dwindled over time. They have cameos, and even Nightmare Fredbear gets burger-themed merch dropped every now and then, but it's nothing huge. But there is one character still in public eye and who is currently embroidered in recent theorizing, and you guessed it, that's Nightmarian. Nightmarian has become a sort of cameo character who appears frequently through Hidden Dolls and Security Breach, Ruin, and even Help Wanted 2. His likeness has also appeared in the Nightmare staff bots, the staff bots who have become corrupted and vandalized. The reason for these appearances are currently unknown. They could just be little fun Easter eggs, but needless to say, it has sparked many a theory. One of the most popular ones being that the puppet or Nightmarian are actually in the Pizzaplex during the events of Security Breach. Currently, though, they're just a bunch of cute little dolls sprinkled around, but it could suggest that sometime in the future, Nightmarian might return. Though then again, Steelwool has gone on record saying that they sometimes put things in their games just as references to encourage theorizing. Now, the average Fnaf fan might react to this revelation with an understandable, "Oh god," but in this case, it adds a small disclaimer to keep in mind. But those plushies aren't the only thing tying back to Fnaf 4. Just look at the timing of Tales from the Pizzaplex's own Dittophobia. How odd that a book series about the Pizzaplex and locations semi-related to it or around it suddenly has a callback all the way to Fnaf 4 in its final book. It almost seems out of place. Could mean something, could mean nothing, but it is interesting. Interesting to think that the nightmares are still relevant. But it makes sense. Like I said, they were part of a major subplot somewhat obscured by the rest of the lore. While Baby was scooping Michael and Afton was getting named in the games, and the games became a little more overtly story-driven with the introduction of voice acting, there was this hidden ghost story in the corner, waiting to be dredged up later. The tragic tale of a young boy and a gang of unspeakable horrors who, let's be frank, was overtaken by those horrors and then surpassed by them as they became part of a complex conspiracy in between games and the books. One relating back to the utter evil of William Afton and the twisted terrors he created, some of which continue to work even after his death, perhaps. But it makes sense. For how can you escape a nightmare that you can't wake up from? Thank you for watching.